Henry Mintzberg is a Canadian academic teaching business and management at the McGill University. In his 1979 book, The Structuring of Organizations, Mintzberg categorized organizations into 4 main types, depending upon 2 characteristics. The first of these was the complexity of the organization's operations, and the second was the pace of change that the organization needed to adapt to. And that gave us a 2x2 matrix that looks something like this. Let's look at these 4 different types of organization one at a time. And we'll start with machine bureaucracy. The machine bureaucracy is the most traditional looking of these 4 types. It has a rigid hierarchical structure and set processes, and it is particularly well suited to routine process-based operations. Within a machine bureaucracy, decisions are made at the top of the organization, and reporting lines need to be followed scrupulously, and indeed they are often vertical through the organization. Therefore, all communication is quite closely prescribed. Within a machine bureaucracy, people need to follow rules, and there are managers at every level of the organization to set and enforce those rules, and to determine standards, and to set up plans. Here you'll find your traditional big manufacturing organizations. Elements of organizations like Toyota and Honeywell are well represented by the machine bureaucracy, or they certainly were going into the 21st century. And there are many variations on the machine bureaucracy, from a strong functional orientation to an orientation according to brand, to a federal structure or even a matrix structure that tries to mix different elements of these. We'll look at federal organizations and matrix organizations in subsequent videos. But now, let's move on to a professional bureaucracy. In a professional bureaucracy, the product isn't a product, it's a service. But the leaders of the organization still want to impose strong and rigid controls on the quality of the service and the way that it's delivered. However, to accommodate the more varied needs of customers or clients, the processes and procedures need a measure more flexibility, and that means the individual professionals working within the professional bureaucracy need a measure more independence and autonomy. This model well represents my own background at professional services firm Deloitte. In fact, it represents a lot of professional organizations like engineering organizations or law practices. Mintzberg's third organizational model is the entrepreneurial startup. If you're starting up a new organization, you need to be able to adapt and change quickly. So, in an entrepreneurial startup, rigid rules and procedures and processes just won't work. But on the other hand, the founders of the entrepreneurial startup do want to be in charge, so we've still got a measure of top-down control. Here we see organizations with a compromise that allows a centralized structure to remain nimble and able to respond and adapt quickly. Entrepreneurial organizations are often still young and therefore small, so we see flat hierarchical structures, often with only 1 or 2 tiers between the frontline workers and the CEO or founder. We often see loose, informal allocation of roles and very little management between the individual producers, who are often software engineers, and the CEO. There will be few officers of the organization to get in the way of getting things done. Mintzberg's fourth structure is the most flexible, and because it's becoming so popular, we will devote a whole video to it later on, and that is the AdHocracy. In an adhocracy, small groups of people come together for an immediate need, they work together to solve it, and then they disband. An adhocracy often sees high levels of collaboration and self-management among teams of highly competent individuals, with very light touch leadership and management from above within the organization. Indeed, that leadership and management is often confined to the major strategic directions, leaving the organization to set up these ad hoc teams to solve immediate problems and move the organization forward. As a result, coordination of the efforts of these different ad hoc teams comes not through a rigid hierarchy or a structure within the organization, but through effective communication between individuals. In 1989, Henry Mintzberg revisited the topic of organizational types in his book Mintzberg on Management. In this book, he introduced two additional organizational types. The first of these was the Diversified Organization, and this very much mirrors Charles Handy's federal organization, which we'll look at in detail in a later video. These organizations tend to create a small central organizing hub that provides a limited number of services for a range of different smaller organizations that deliver services or products. These smaller organizations have more or less autonomy depending on where we are in the cycle of fashion, because there is a certain amount of fashionableness between the idea of centralization or devolution of autonomy. It's hard to know where we are in this cycle because at the time of recording it, we've had a year of pandemic in which organizational performance and processes has been somewhat unusual, and as an individual practitioner, I found it very hard to get out and speak to people within organizations. But certainly what we do see is waves of centralization and then decentralization. Indeed, those waves tend to start in one part of the world and propagate. So we don't find every part of the world and every organization at the same stage in the cycle. Mintzberg's sixth organizational type is, as far as I can find, the only discussion of this type of organization. He seems to have filled the gap that pretty much every other thinker has failed to identify. And I say pretty much every other because I don't know all of the different thinkers there are, but I've not spotted this in any other discussion. And he calls these a missionary organization. Missionary organizations are driven by a mission, a strong sense of purpose. This single clear mission provides a basis both for every strategic decision and choice that the organization makes and for the motivation of individual employees. They join these organizations and remain committed to them because they believe in the mission. As a result, this missionary organization type is a good representation for many charities and non-governmental organizations, arguably for some government organizations as well. So, Mintzberg put forward a simple framework of 4 types of organizational model and later added 2 more valuable additions to his list. In subsequent videos, we will of course look at a range of other organizational models, but again, many of them will be variations and adaptations of Mintzberg's core ideas. Please do give us a thumbs up if you like this video. There's loads more great management courses content to come, so please do subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of them. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video, and in the meantime, keep learning.